My name is Ivy. I was born in London, into a family that looked polished from the outside. An Oxford-educated father, a cultured mother who painted. We traveled, went to boarding schools, had all the appearances of privilege. But inside that house there was no warmth, no hugs, no I love you. It was elegant and cold, and children like me and my brother were left to raise ourselves. At 12 I was sent to boarding school, and at 13 I was expelled. I came back restless, invisible, and already leaning on alcohol. By 14 I was working in a bar, pretending to be 19. I discovered speed, then heroin. My father's only concern was that I not come home drunk, but drugs were easier to hide than despair. Our house was so large we could avoid each other completely. Silence became our family's first language. London in the late 70s was alive with rebellion, music, and danger. I found work assisting a famous hairstylist, suddenly standing backstage with musicians and celebrities. I loved the illusion, the way makeup and light could change a life for a night. But behind the glamour was my other education, heroin. I used it to quiet the ache that no art or attention could soothe. At 15 I left school for good. At 16 I drifted between salon jobs and the streets. With a friend, I learned how to pull men from Earl's Court for quick money. It was not a grand plan, only survival. 20 pounds for a night out, for heroin, for the feeling of control. People imagine trauma arrives like a storm, but sometimes it's just the absence of love, repeated every day, until you look for it anywhere you can. By 17, I felt trapped. London was both too small for my secrets and too vast for my hope. I could already see my future if I stayed, an addict, half alive, disappearing. My mother was American, so I had dual nationality. That became my escape hatch. I wrote letters to salons in Los Angeles, asking for a chance. A few said yes. That was enough. Leaving home wasn't dramatic. It looked like an errand, a suitcase packed with hope, not clothes. My parents barely reacted. My mother nodded as if I said I'd be gone an hour. My father gave a distant hug I wasn't sure I imagined. At Heathrow, I watched planes lift like promises. I told myself Los Angeles would teach me another language. Sunlight, warmth, possibility. What I carried was simple, a talent for making others shine, a hunger for affection I'd never been given, and a secret romance with substances that would follow me across oceans. I arrived in Los Angeles with a job offer, a tiny rented room, and the belief that I could build a different story. I was wrong, of course, but also right. Because the truth is, you don't escape yourself by changing cities. You carry the storm with you. But Los Angeles would also give me new masks, new stages, and eventually a path into the life I'm here to tell you about. This is where my story begins. When I first arrived in Los Angeles at 17, I carried a single suitcase, a list of phone numbers from salons that had answered my letters, and the belief that sunlight would heal me. London had been gray and heavy. Los Angeles shimmered, almost unreal, like a movie set I'd accidentally stepped into. I rented a tiny room near Hollywood, thin walls, a mattress on the floor. It didn't matter. To me, it was freedom. By day, I worked in hair and makeup, mostly assisting. I was young but determined, and people liked my eye. I could make a tired face glow, hide shadows, create illusion. The industry in Los Angeles thrived on illusion, and I fit right in. On film sets, backstage at clubs, in makeup chairs before a performance, I learned how much people were willing to pay to feel transformed. But at night, another life began. Heroin traveled with me. I didn't need to look for it. It seemed to find me. In London, I had hidden it. In Los Angeles, I was surrounded by people who treated it as just another accessory, like a jacket you put on before heading out. I was 17, then 18, then 20, and the line between fun and dependence blurred until it disappeared. Hollywood nightlife was a carousel of neon and shadows. I was drawn to it. The clubs where the music pounded until sunrise, the after-parties in apartments that smelled like perfume and despair. Everyone looked glamorous at first glance, but up close, you could see the cracks. We were all running from something. My escape was the needle. The first time I used in Los Angeles, I remember thinking, this city finally feels quiet. Drugs cost money, and salon work wasn't enough. I started to see the same problem I had faced in London. How do you fund an addiction? I didn't want to walk the streets in a strange city, especially not one as spread out and dangerous as LA. But survival has a way of creating opportunities. A roommate of mine was working as a phone girl for an escort service. She answered calls, set appointments, connected clients with women. I listened, asked questions, and realized this could be my path. The difference between street work and escorting felt enormous. Street work was exposure, risk, constant danger. Escorting was controlled, at least on the surface. Hotels, apartments, drivers sometimes. It looked more professional. I was scared, yes, but I was also tired of struggling. So I said yes to my first call. I remember the hotel room, beige curtains, too much air freshener, the hum of an air conditioner that never turned off. The man was polite, nervous even, and the envelope on the dresser felt heavier than it was. When I left, I thought, that was easier than I expected. I could do this, and I did. For a while, escorting and salon work overlapped. By day, I made stars shine. By night, I became a stranger's temporary dream. My addiction made the double life possible. Heroin softened the edges, erased the contradictions. But it also deepened my isolation. I stopped calling home. My parents barely noticed. In their world, silence had always been normal. As months turned into years, I realized I hated the unpredictability of escorting, the calls at 3 a.m., the snowball of exhaustion, the danger of walking into an unknown room. I longed for structure, something I could count on. That's when I discovered brothel work. In Los Angeles during the late 80s, discreet apartments operated quietly in neighborhoods like West Hollywood and Koreatown. You'd start at 10 in the morning, finish by evening, and walk away with a stack of cash. It was safer, more organized, and, strangely, it gave me community. For the first time, I felt part of something. The women I met weren't caricatures. They were smart, funny, from every kind of background. We sat together on slow afternoons, sharing stories, braiding each other's hair, laughing between clients. For someone like me, who had grown up without affection, that simple sisterhood felt like oxygen. I found confidence in those rooms. I heard compliments I'd never heard before. You're beautiful, you're clever, you're strong. I started to believe them. Of course, addiction never let me go. My 20s were a blur of highs and crashes, appointments and overdoses narrowly avoided. There were nights I woke up not sure how I had survived. But the money kept flowing, and in Los Angeles, money could buy you time, a roof, another day. The city fed my double life. Makeup artist by day, escort or brothel worker by night, addict always. People often ask if I regret it. I regret the drugs, yes. I regret the years wasted in fog, the thousands of dollars gone in smoke. But I don't regret the work. In many ways, it saved me. It gave me purpose when I had none, connection when I felt utterly alone, and a chance to build an identity outside of broken girl from London. Looking back, I see a young woman chasing two illusions, that heroin could erase pain, and that Los Angeles could rewrite my past. Neither was true, of course, but both gave me something real in the moment, relief, survival, a way forward. That was enough to keep going. By the end of my 20s, I was no longer the girl who arrived with a suitcase of hope. I was Ivy Monroe, addict, escort, brothel worker, survivor. And though I didn't know it yet, this life would eventually lead me to power I never expected, to run my own places, to become not just a worker, but a madam. But that's another part of the story. This chapter ends here, with me in Los Angeles, young, lost, but alive. When I think about the turning point of my 20s, it wasn't a single night or dramatic choice. It was the first time I walked into a discreet brothel apartment in Los Angeles and felt oddly at home. I had spent years drifting between the salon world and escort calls, always alone, always covering my tracks. But inside that apartment, 4 women, soft lamps, the hum of a fan, I felt something I hadn't known since childhood: belonging. The work itself was not glamorous. The hours were long, the walls thin, the money sometimes unpredictable. But it was steady. We started at 10 in the morning, finished by early evening. There were no 3 a.m. calls, no stumbling through strange neighborhoods in heels. Clients arrived by appointment, discreet, polite enough. And when the day was slow, we sat together, braiding each other's hair, smoking, sharing stories, complaining about boyfriends or landlords. For me, those afternoons mattered more than the envelopes of cash. I had grown up without affection, without the simple language of touch or encouragement. In the brothel, I learned it secondhand. A girl would say, "You're gorgeous," or "You're stronger than you know," and I would believe it, if only for an hour. The women came from everywhere: Mexico, Eastern Europe, small towns in the Midwest. Some were single mothers, some were students, some were lost like me. We were different but united by the same rule: survival. Clients varied as much as the women. Some were lonely men who just wanted company. Others were executives who liked the privacy. There were men who fell in love for an hour, and men who treated us like therapists disguised in silk. It surprised me how often kindness appeared. Of course there were difficult encounters, men who pushed boundaries, but far fewer than outsiders imagine. I learned to read a man the moment he walked through the door: posture, eyes, the way he held his coat. That intuition kept me safe more than anything else. Money came fast. I remember walking home with my purse so heavy it felt like bricks. I also remember how quickly it vanished: rent, drugs, nights out, helping friends, lending to boyfriends who never paid back. In those years, I believed money was endless. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'll make it again. That's the trick addiction plays. It convinces you there's always more time, more chances. Still, the brothel gave me something heroin never could: confidence. Clients told me I was beautiful, witty, captivating. I'd laugh, thinking, they're just saying that because they paid. But deep down, part of me absorbed it. I carried myself differently. For a girl who had never been told "I love you" at home, even a transactional compliment was a kind of medicine. I also learned management by accident. On slow days, I organized the schedule, answered the phone, smoothed over arguments. I realized I was good at keeping the peace, at making people feel secure. That talent would matter later when I opened my own places. At the time, it just felt natural. Finally, something I was useful for. Of course, I was still using. Heroin was always there, lurking at the edge of everything. Some of the girls avoided drugs entirely. Others hid it like I did. I overdosed more than once, waking up with the taste of metal in my mouth, ashamed but alive. I promised myself I'd quit, then return to the needle by nightfall. That was the rhythm of my 20s. Money, affection, relapse, repeat. Looking back, the brothel years feel almost golden compared to what came before. There was structure, routine, even joy. I laughed more in those apartments than I had in my entire adolescence. We built a strange family, stitched together from pain and resilience. Some of us disappeared, moved away, overdosed, vanished into the city. Others thrived, bought houses, left the life behind. For me, it was preparation. I didn't know it yet, but I was studying, watching how the business worked, how women supported each other, how clients could be managed. By the time I was 27, I was no longer just another girl in the lineup. I was someone the others came to for advice. I had a knack for keeping things running smoothly, for calming chaos. I started dreaming of more, of having my own place, of being in control rather than just showing up. The idea felt impossible, yet it flickered in my mind every time I handed cash to someone else who owned the apartment. At night, alone in my room, I sometimes wondered if this was a life or just a long detour. But then I remembered where I had come from: a cold London house, silence as parenting, the gnawing ache of invisibility. Compared to that, these apartments with their cheap candles and shared laughter were a kind of paradise. The world outside called us names: degraded, exploited, lost. Inside, we were mothers, daughters, survivors. We were women who carried our own secrets and still found time to hold each other up. That contradiction, stigma outside, solidarity inside, shaped me more than anything else. Those years gave me two gifts: the courage to imagine myself as more than an addict, and the blueprint for building something of my own. Soon I would take the next step, becoming not just a worker, but a madam. It would bring power, money, danger, and lessons I still carry. But before all of that, I had to survive the storm of my own making. For now, remember this: in a world that judged us, the brothel gave me what my family never had: community, confidence, and the feeling, however fleeting, of being enough. My name is Ivy. I was born in London into a family that looked polished from the outside: an Oxford-educated father, a cultured mother who painted. We traveled, went to boarding schools, had all the appearances of privilege. But inside that house there was no warmth, no hugs, no I love you. It was elegant and cold, and children like me and my brother were left to raise ourselves. At 12 I was sent to boarding school, and at 13 I was expelled. I came back restless, invisible, and already leaning on alcohol. By 14 I was working in a bar, pretending to be 19. I discovered speed, then heroin. My father's only concern was that I not come home drunk, but drugs were easier to hide than despair. Our house was so large we could avoid each other completely. Silence became our family's first language. London in the late 70s was alive with rebellion, music, and danger. I found work assisting a famous hairstylist, suddenly standing backstage with musicians and celebrities. I loved the illusion, the way makeup and light could change a life for a night. But behind the glamour was my other education, heroin. I used it to quiet the ache that no art or attention could soothe. The turning point didn't come in some grand moment. It came one ordinary morning when I woke up, looked around, and realized I couldn't keep going. There was a bottle of vodka on the floor, a used syringe on the table, and sunlight streaming through blinds that hadn't been cleaned in years. I saw the room for what it was, a grave. I flushed the drugs, poured out the vodka, and went to a methadone clinic. It was the smallest, bravest thing I had ever done. That decision didn't make me sober overnight. Recovery is messy. I slipped, stumbled, crawled. But the difference was this: I wanted to live. For 40 years I had used. Now I wanted to stop. The brothels gave me stability, but for the first time I imagined a life beyond them. I imagined being present for my son. I imagined mornings without shaking. I imagined peace. Sobriety didn't arrive like a gift. It came like a war, one day at a time, one battle after another. But slowly, painfully, I built a new rhythm. Therapy, 12-step meetings, long walks, even Eastern practices like Qigong gave me tools I never had as a child. I began to understand trauma, not as an excuse, but as a wound that could be healed. I began to forgive my parents for their silence, even if I could never forget it. Looking back, my 30s and 40s were years of extremes. Death close enough to touch, money close enough to waste, moments of joy tangled with years of pain. But they were also the years I learned that survival is not enough. To live, you must choose differently. To live, you must lay down the needle and pick up something else. Hope, love, even just the courage to keep breathing. By the time I reached my 50s, I was 8 years sober. For the first time since I was 12, I could say those words, sober. That alone felt like a miracle. This chapter of my story is not about glamour. It's about crisis, near death, and the stubborn spark that refused to go out. If I hadn't chosen differently that morning, if I hadn't flushed the drugs, I would not be here telling you this now. The brothels, the clients, the chaos, they were part of me. But the real story is survival. And survival, I've learned, is only the beginning. My name is Ivy, and after everything, after 4 decades of drugs, 25 years in sex work, 5 brothels, and countless near-death experiences, I can finally say something simple. I am sober. That one word, sober, took me longer to reach than any city, any career, or any man. It is the hardest thing I have ever done, and the most rewarding. Sobriety didn't erase the past. My childhood neglect, the heroin, the nights spent selling my body or running brothels, those remain part of my story. But sobriety gave me something I never had before, perspective. When I finally stopped using, it was like opening a window in a house I didn't realize had been sealed shut. Suddenly there was air, light, possibility. People ask me often, do I regret my years as an escort, as a madam? The answer is complicated. Prostitution saved my life when nothing else could. It gave me community, money, structure, and even confidence. I met extraordinary women, clever, resilient, kind. I met clients who were broken in their own ways, men who confided in me things they could tell no one else. In those rooms between the transactions, I saw something deeply human: loneliness, longing, vulnerability. And in listening, in being present, I became more empathetic than I ever thought possible. But drugs, I regret those. Drugs stole decades, money, health, opportunities. If I had not used, perhaps I would have built something different. Yet without them, maybe I would not have had the empathy to survive in sex work or the resilience to finally change. That paradox is the riddle of my life. When I left the brothel world, I thought I would miss it. I thought I would miss the women, the money, the adrenaline of managing chaos. But what I found instead was peace. I discovered practices like Qigong, which helped me release trauma stored in my body. I went to therapy and faced memories I had buried for years. I rebuilt a relationship with my son, who grew into a strong and disciplined man. He chose the Marines, a path of order and discipline, the opposite of my chaos. I am proud of him in ways I can hardly put into words. What do I think of men now, after all I have seen? I don't hate them, quite the opposite. I understand them. I see their fears, their fetishes, their fragile places. Some women carry bitterness from sex work. I never did. To me, sex work was a job, and in many ways, a kind of service. I helped men feel seen, even if only for an hour. That doesn't erase the darker moments, the times I ran for my life or had to talk my way out of danger. But even then, I survived not with hatred, but with a strange empathy. Today, 8 years sober, my life feels both brand new and ancient. I do things now that most people discover in their 20s. Morning walks, laughing at small things, learning to decorate my home with care. Sometimes I feel like a child, seeing the world for the first time. Sometimes I feel ancient, carrying the weight of 40 years of scars. Do I have regrets? Yes, but I also have gratitude. Every overdose I survived, every bad night that didn't kill me, every client who treated me with dignity, every woman who sat beside me in a brothel and shared her story, they all shaped me. I learned not to sweat the small things. I learned that life will knock you down, but if you breathe and wait, the storm passes. That's the biggest lesson I carry. Don't panic, it passes. I've written my story into a book. I tell it here too because silence kills. When you don't speak your truth, it eats you from the inside. I believe stories save lives. Maybe mine will help another woman trapped in addiction, another teenager lost in a cold family, another person who thinks it's too late. It's never too late. If I can climb out after 40 years, anyone can. I used to define myself as an addict, a prostitute, a madam. Today, I define myself as a survivor, a mother, a woman who learned how to live. My past will always be mine, but my future belongs to me. This is my legacy, not the money wasted, not the men I saw, not the brothels I ran, but the fact that I survived and that I finally learned how to live without destroying myself. So here I am, Ivy, sober, breathing, alive, and for the first time, truly free.